And with 35 is the whole thing told all over again as Moses and Bezalel and the other craftspeople do everything in numbing repetition as to what God had spoken earlier. The Holy of Holies is built, the ark and its lid, the holy place is erected, the showbread table, the lampstand, the incense altar, the courtyard is signified and drawn out, and the altar and the laver of water, and then there's houses for the Levites and dwellings for the 12 tribes. So, because what happens then, as we'll see, is imagine this whole board as the camp of the Hebrews. You know, there's millions of them, and here's the Ark of the Covenant, and it's planted right in the middle. And so the people encamp all around, and this is the place where they come to meet God through the mediation of the priests, and Aaron in particular, and Moses. Yahweh, so this is, Yahweh is at the center of Israelite life, and everything is in its proper place. Chapter 40, verse 34. No, you can have a lovely church. Doesn't mean God is there, huh? So they've done all the work and erected this according to God's design. And here comes the big finish. Okay? Remember, the tabernacle perpetuates Mount Sinai. But God has yet to take up his presence. So, verse 34. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, okay, the innermost place. And Moses was not able to enter the tent of meeting, because the cloud abode upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Throughout all their journeys, whenever the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the people of Israel would go onward. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not go onward till the day that it was taken up. For throughout all their journeys, the cloud of the Lord was upon the tabernacle by day, and fire was in it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel. The presence of God here, unlike Mount Sinai, is movable. God is available, yet on the move. God will tell them, it's time, and up they will pick up and move on.
So they recreated this entire structure with every time they stopped?
Every time they stopped, they would erect it according to this pattern. Okay? It was where God had promised to meet them. It was a centering place and a traveling presence. God is now present to them in a new way, powered by the promise of the covenant. Okay? He will remain with them now all the time, not just occasionally. He will be close, not distant, on the move, not fixed. So let's pull back the camera here. Okay? The movement that we have reviewed. From the Hebrew people have moved from servitude to Pharaoh, to work and worship, servitude, to Yahweh. From enforced building, Pharaoh's cities, to willing building for God. From slavery, the word again is eved, to worship, avodah. The same root was there, V-A-V-D. Eved is slavery, avodah is worship. There's a link. It's serving, it's servant. Again, we call what time is the morning service. You know, that language we find in English still. So and move from slavery now to finding their place through commitment to Yahweh in the covenant. All of this is rooted in God's memory of us. Back in chapter 6, verse 5, God says, Remember, after the people have groaned, God says to Moses, I have heard the groaning of the people of Israel, whom the Egyptians hold in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant. Okay, so the pledge, now, not the covenant that we've talked about, but the pledge God made. I told you there really were earlier covenants, and some of the various biblical lines or streams. Remember that? Well, this dominant one, that's not the point, huh? All hanging on a warning against presuming upon God's presence. That this is not God's, this is God's dwelling, his tent, shakan, not his house or his place where he has to be, yashav. And it's all based on a very big conditional if. Look back at chapter 19. Verses 4 through 6. This is what I said this morning. You know, there's what God has done in the past, what God is doing now, what God will do. So chapter 19, verses 4 through 6. Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, tell the people of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my own possession among all people. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. Questions? Yes?
Exodus took 40 years, is that correct?
From the leaving from Egypt to the arrival in the promised land, yes.
So when they were given all these instructions at Mount Sinai,
Yes.
are we kind of assuming that's maybe like a halfway point?
Oh, no. This all happens in the very first year.
Oh.
Very first year. They went to Target, they went to Shopko, they had some of these things. Within a year, it's about 11 or 12 months for this all to get done.
Okay, so they built and rebuilt this tent of meeting many times then before.
Well, they're evidently they're staying at Sinai until it's built. And then the Lord takes possession of it, and then they get on the road. I mean, we're going to find out. They don't go all the way. They do move around. So yes, there is a series of buildings, and then they hang up. They stay for like 38 years at one spot later. Okay, so they're really moving a lot for 1 year. They don't go anywhere. We'll find out. Yes.
When they constructed the ark, they had used gold and silver and bronze. Is this some of this gold, silver, and bronze they took from Egypt?
Exactly. That's why in that passage when Moses said, tell the people that you're leaving and press them for reparations. And so the Egyptians said, here, get out of our country. And the idea is they gave them all this stuff. It's from that they're building all of this.
So I couldn't imagine they had much of that on their own. They were slaves in Egypt.
Right, so that's, again, the biblical story, in some ways it's kind of loosey-goosey. In other ways it's very carefully thought through. That's where they would have gotten all of that.
My question is in reference to that daily sacrifice they had to do, the 2 lambs and the cereal offering. They're still just dependent on manna right now, right?
Yes.
So is this, they weren't really using the tabernacle in its full, they weren't doing the burnt offerings and stuff.
I think the biblical text expects us to believe that they were. So what you're coming up with is, well, if they really had all these livestock, which they did, remember they left Egypt, that was the whole deal. Pharaoh said, Pharaoh wouldn't let them go without their livestock, or wanted to go without their livestock, but they would not go without it. They have these huge flocks, but they're not eating them. They're letting God provide.
And the cereal offering. 'Cause
Cereal offering.
They don't have crops. So
They don't have crops. You're right. You're seeing some of the seams in the story. What they're really doing, they're looking ahead. They're looking to when this gets to the promised land. They're looking ahead to all of that. But I think the assumption is that they were indeed doing this while they were 40 years in the desert. Moses will go to the tent of meeting frequently. There'll be other stories you see that come up with that. Don't expect tight consistency. Other questions?
Do they make these lamb sacrifices anyplace else other than in a temple, or like a synagogue, for example? do
When
they
we get
sacrifice?
to Genesis, you're going to see that the patriarchs make sacrifices everywhere. When we get to Jerusalem, when we get to the Promised Land, offerings were made in lots of places until the period of King Josiah, and then everything had to be centralized. That'll be later. So you should expect every father, every head of household was a priest in his own household and would make offerings wherever, on every hill. But later on, that got to be seen as a problem. And so there was a move to centralize everything at the temple, only at the temple. That's about the year 700, 650 before Christ. Okay? Other questions?
Can you just re-explain the Day of Atonement and
Yom Kippur.
Yeah. Can you
Okay, the
just
Day of
explain-
Atonement is Yom Kippur. Yom is day.
Okay.
Okay, in Hebrew, Yom. Kippur is atonement, huh? You're going to read about it next month, so I'm not going to say too much.
Okay.
In Leviticus, there's a ritual for the Day of Atonement when the priest takes animal blood after he himself has sacrificed an animal to purify himself. Then he goes into the tent behind the curtain where the Ark of the Covenant is, and with his finger he dips it and he sprinkles blood, animal blood, at the Ark. And that's the essential element. That's the high point of the ritual. But you'll read about it next time. Now, there's no temple now, so Jews don't do that anymore. Huh? There's no ark, there's no temple. Things have changed. It's another 4,000 years. Things have changed. But this is the origins of that. Other questions? How about a short break, and then we'll go into our last small group. We'll be out by 3.